it wasn't just that Christianity was the official religion. It wasn't just that Christianity was the state's religion. It was also the only religion. Non-Christians were no longer welcome in the empire. Jews and pagans needed to convert or leave. And when that happened, the Archbishop of Alexandria, Archbishop Theophilus, issued his own decree asking the Christian population of Alexandria to go ahead and get rid of the pagans and the Jews. They went to the Jewish quarter. Alexandria was the largest Jewish city on the planet. Alexandria is where the Septuagint was made. So the second Greek pharaoh, Ptolemy II, Ptolemy Philadelphus, had such a large Jewish population in Alexandria that couldn't speak Hebrew, so they didn't know how to read their holy texts, that he decided to commission a Greek translation of the Old Testament into Greek so that the Greek-speaking Jews living in Alexandria would be able to access their holy texts. So he got 70-something rabbis, we don't know the exact number, and he made the Septuagint, which means 70. And the Septuagint was because he had 70 rabbis translate the Old Testament so that it could weed out bias and error, and they would merge the 70 translations into one so they could get an accurate translation. We have since found the Dead Sea Scrolls, which were older, but not by much. I think they were 200 or 300 years old. So now we have the original Old Testament material in the original Hebrew, and we've compared them. You don't need to change your translations. The Septuagint is spot on. It was an amazing translation. In other words, he pulled it off. The mob goes to the Jewish quarter and just begins massacring the Jews. When they're done destroying the Jewish quarter, which won't be inhabited again for another 1,500 years, they then go and try to find the pagans. The problem with the pagans is they were intermingled with the Christians. So you just literally had to knock on doors and go, "Are you pagan?" Pretty much everybody is going to deny it. So then you go, "Who are your pagan neighbors?" And then, right now you can find out, because people will rat each other out. It's hilarious. Just ask the Yugoslavs when they decided to kill each other in Bosnia-Herzegovina. They then go to the Great Library. The Great Library was run by a woman named Hypatia. Hypatia wasn't actually technically a pagan. She was a theist, so she did believe that there was an entity who created the universe, a single entity. But she didn't think that anybody could know its nature, so she rejected Christianity. But the majority of the students at the Great Library and the majority of the professors at the Great Library were, in fact, pagan. And so the mob decides to get rid of the Great Library, and they destroy it. But we, as a society, get lucky, because before they destroyed it, by a few decades, there was a Persian emperor who got jealous of the Great Library. His name was Shapur the Great. Shapur wanted his own Great Library. He defeats a Roman emperor, Valerian. He captures 2 intact Roman legions. He sells one into slavery in China, takes the money from the sale, and then he uses that money and orders the Roman legions to build him 2 brand new cities. One of them is Gondishapur. In Gondishapur, he builds an academy that will be the Persian equivalent to the Great Library. And he starts collecting books. He's having trouble getting Roman books because the Romans and the Persians hate each other so much, but he's having no trouble getting Chinese texts and Indian texts. And so he's adding those to the Persian knowledge. Lao Tzu, he gets Lao Tzu, one of the greatest philosophers in human history. Not him, but his books, right? Lao Tzu was 600 years earlier. But he gets his books, which is amazing, because when Qin the Great unifies India, he bans Lao Tzu and starts wiping out Lao Tzu's works. But now there's a place for them to survive. When the Great Library is burnt, a group of Romans decide to recover, and they do it at the Academy of Athens. When they do this at the Academy of Athens, that gets banned. So they get some of the books together at the Academy, but Emperor Justinian goes, nah, we got rid of the Great Library, we don't need an academy to replace it. Those Greek scholars in 529, when the academy is banned, grab all their books, they jump on a ship, they head to Syria. They cross Syria, they get to what would roughly be the Iraq-Syria border today. It was roughly where the Roman-Persian border was. And they approach the Persians and they say, we want asylum. And the Persians go, yeah, of course. Who would want to live under Roman rule anyway? These guys are crazy. And they go, yeah, not for us only. We want asylum for our books. And the Persians go, your books? And they go, yeah, we're bringing everything we have left that hasn't been burnt by Christian mobs. And the Persians go, oh, come with us. And they take them to Gondi Shapur, and they take all those books and they merge them in. Emperor Khusro is the guy who does this. So now at Gondi Shapur, they have all these Roman and Greek and Egyptian works, and they're sitting there with all these Chinese and Persian and Indian works. And they kind of recovered the loss of the Great Library a little bit. Rome and Persia keep fighting. They do one giant slugfest in the early 600s. It's a nasty, brutal affair. The Persians capture Turkey, Syria, Palestine, Egypt. It looks like Rome is going to go down in a ball of flames. But the Romans somehow get out of it, in part because one of the Persian generals decides to rebel. He takes the chunk of Rome that he captured. He creates a third little empire. Eventually he invades Persia, overthrows the Persian emperor, becomes the new Persian emperor, and is stabbed to death a few days later. And the Romans are like, wow, whew, because militarily it was touch and go there for a while. And then something amazing happens. There's a new religion. And it's Islam. The Prophet Muhammad dies in 632. That year, the Caliph, his follower, the first ruler after the Prophet, orders that the Arabian Peninsula be conquered and unified. For the first time in Arab history, the Arabian Peninsula was ruled by a single state within a year. That same year, 633, Abu Bakr launches two armies at the same time, simultaneously, one into the Persian Empire, one into the Roman Empire. Outnumbered, outmanned, out-technologied. There's no way the Arabs should prevail. Within a few decades, they completely conquer the Persian Empire. It was 1,200 years old at that point. Can you imagine a 1,200-year-old empire? You can't comprehend it not being there. They bring the Romans to their knees. They don't finish them off. But by the time they're done, so from 633, the moment they start the conquering, to 711, the moment they've conquered Spain. They owned everything from Pakistan to Spain and Central Asia. They built the largest empire in human history in just a few decades. 60% of the world's Christian population. The empire itself was 2% Muslim, but it owned 60% of the world's Christians. It was an empire of Buddhists and Hindus. There were even some pagans hanging around. And Zoroastrians. The Arabs were a strange conqueror population because they weren't forcibly converting people by the sword. They weren't mass genociding whole populations. They weren't enslaving 1/3 of Gaul. They did fight in France, just for the record. 725? That's the year stuck in my head. It's probably wrong. The Battle of Tours, also known as the Battle of Poitiers, against Charles Martel. And the French win, just for the record. But the Arabs, as they were retreating, carved off Narbonne and continued to rule a piece of France for a few centuries. these Arabs were humble. So when they conquered Persia, they went to the Persians and they went, dude, we don't know how to run an empire. This is way over our pay grade. We just started ruling ourselves. We don't know what we're doing here. You guys are amazing at this. What we need you to do is keep running the empire. We don't even know how to mint coins. The first Arab coins show 3 men standing next to each other. They're holding a cross in one hand and a globe with a cross sticking out of it. So they had a cross in both hands. Because they took the Roman mint and they just began counterfeiting Roman coins. In fact, the word fulus, which is the word for money, comes from the Roman folus, which was one of the coins that they were counterfeiting. Those Arabs walked into Gondi Shapur after conquering it. And they turned to the Persians and they went, what's that? And the Persians go, it's an academy. The Arabs go, cool, what is that? They go, it's a repository of all the knowledge of the world that we know of. And the Arabs go, show us. And the Persians go, what choice do we have? Take them in. And the Arabs go, teach us. And the Persians go, what choice do we have? We will. It takes a while. It doesn't happen right away. But in the 8th century, Al-Kindi begins converting these texts from Greek to Arabic. And that's a huge leap because now it means a larger portion of the population can start to read them. A guy named Al-Khwarizmi, a Persian, a Muslim Persian in the Arab Empire, decides to start focusing heavily on Hindu mathematics. Al-Khwarizmi invents algebra and Arabic numerals. So the next time you're doing math, remember to thank Al-Khwarizmi that you're not using an abacus to do Roman numerals, which are impossible. Really try. Set up Roman numerals, put a minus sign under it, and try and subtract Roman numerals from Roman numerals. You'll tear your hair out. Forget multiplication and division. Al-Khwarizmi creates a math system that you can work on. He's so advanced, he invents algorithms 1,200 years ago. In fact, algorithm was the Roman attempt to say his name. Al-Khwarizmi, algorithm. So every time you say algorithm, you're actually saying this Persian philosopher's name. Then, in the 10th century, there's a guy named Farabi. The Romans call him Farabius, or Al-Farabius, because the Arabs called him Al-Farabi. Farabi realized that he had a problem. He wanted to talk about everything and anything under the sun. He wanted no limits. He was a polymath. He wanted to talk about psychology and politics. He wanted to do astronomy. He wanted to do religion. He knew he was eventually going to step on somebody's toes, and he was going to get it. So what he did was he wrote all the books he wanted to, and then he put it in his will that when he died, they would get published. And so as a result, we don't really know as much about him because during his lifetime, he spent it as like a gardener. And what he would do is he would garden at the palace, and he would listen to all the political conversations inside, pretending that he's tending to the roses or something. But in reality, he was writing it all down. He's going to ask really strange questions, questions that maybe not many folks had asked before. So when the Persians made their empire, they did something completely unexpected, completely bizarre. When you would get conquered by Kurosh the Great or subsequent Persians, you weren't subjugated, enslaved. You became a partner of the empire. In other words, you were in a good place being conquered. It wasn't that horrible, which is strange because that's usually not how it is. In fact, Kurosh insisted on the diversity being held up. If you go to Persepolis, Takht Jamshid, if you go to Persia, I went in 2002. It's fantastic. Good luck getting a visa. It was a nightmare. I'll never try again. It's not going to happen. I give up. But if I could go again, I would definitely do it. When you get to Takht Jamshid, there's walls that show people in every kind of dress imaginable, because it's a celebration of the nations. The Romans erected a monument to the massacre of the Dacians. I'm pretty sure that in Rome there is the only monument commemorating genocide. It's still there. You can go see it. It's in your art textbook, your art history textbook. They show you the bottom parts. They never show you the top, because the bottom parts of the tower show the Roman army getting together to go, and everybody's excited about that. At the top, it shows the genocide. The Arabs are like the Persians. They didn't reject the different cultures. They didn't reject the different religions. They embraced them and they accepted them. And they said, yeah, cool, keep doing your thing. If you want to convert, do it. In other words, this wasn't a forced empire like so many empires in our history. Al-Farabi asks a question, though, that throws everybody off. Because, so, if I say you're tolerant, that doesn't mean you love the other guy. We should be a tolerant society. That's a really low bar, right? Tolerant is, yeah, the world would be better if you weren't here, but I guess I'll tolerate you. That's not especially amazing when a person says, I'm tolerant of others. What I think would be really amazing is if you said, I really love others. That's a different level. And Al-Farabi asks that question, and he does it in a way that makes everybody uncomfortable. So the first two names of God, God has 99 names, Rahman Rahim, the beneficent and the merciful. And it's pure mercy, it's not human mercy, right? Where you surrender to me and I'm like, I could kill you, but I guess I won't. Not that, it's pure mercy. The 50th name is Al-Haq, which means the truth. Al-Farabi asks the most annoying question ever. If God is beneficent and he's merciful, then why on earth are only 20% of the world's population Christians, Jews, and Muslims? Because in Islam, right, it's built in that Christians, Jews, and Muslims can get to heaven. In fact, they expanded it to include Zoroastrians. What about the other 80%? Did God set them up to fail? It's not their fault that they don't know about the three Abrahamic religions. So is God condemning them to all eternity in hell? This is why he couldn't publish while he was alive. And then he goes, I have no choice but to believe that God gave Hindus Hinduism, and God gave Zoroastrians Zoroastrianism, and God gave Buddhists Buddhism. But if God is Al-Haq, if he's the truth, he can't possibly have lied to them. Therefore, every religion must have access to heaven. Therefore, every religion should get equal respect. In fact, he went one step further and said, when you think about it then, the only way to truly know God would be to know every religion. He starts a whole movement. The Sufis go, oh wow, that's amazing. No bounds on what we can study. We can go learn yoga from India and bring it back. Al-Farabi wasn't just a polymath, he was a genius. And the way I can be certain in that statement was because of the following. So there's another Persian, his name is Ibn Sina. Ibn Sina says to us that I read Aristotle 40 times. Now, he didn't read Aristotle 40 times. We actually don't know how many times he read him. I read Aristotle 40 times was an idiom. It meant I memorized Aristotle word for word. When he said I read Aristotle 40 times, what he meant was, you can tell me the politics, page 5, third chapter, and he could tell it to you word for word. He had the text memorized in his head. He said, after saying this, I don't know what it says. I'm sure there's some incredible genius here. I can't tap into it. The words don't make sense. The reason the words didn't make sense was they were idiomatic. That is to say, Aristotle taught in idioms. Well, he taught in idioms that by the 1st century AD were now 1,000 years old. And even the Greeks didn't know those idioms. So it wasn't like the Arabs could go to the Greeks and go, dude, what does this idiom mean? Because the language had evolved and those idioms were forgotten. So whether you read it in the original Greek or you read it in Al-Kindi's translation, either way you still didn't know what the idioms meant. Nobody did. Even the Greeks couldn't read Aristotle. And so they're stumped. They don't know what to do. And Ibn Sina goes, I know there's a genius in here. I got to tap into it. How do I tap into it? One day he's in the book section of the bazaar, and he passes by a book, and it says, it's written by Farabi. It says, Al-Farabi's idiomatic translation of Aristotle. Al-Farabi would read an idiom, try to guess what it meant. He'd plug it in, see if it worked. If it didn't work, he'd come back, try a different one. And he kept doing this until he decoded the idioms. And he realized what each idiom meant. And now you could know Aristotle and what he was saying. Ibn Sina reads this, figures out what the idioms are. He already has the text memorized. Ibn Sina suddenly, instantly knows Aristotle. And he goes nuts. What he realizes is that Aristotle is onto something about the nature of the universe. So, Aristotle says, so I guess I have to tell you what Plato says. Plato says that there's 3 realities. There's the reality we experience. So this floor, that wall, the chair, my suit, me. But that's not the real real. The realer real is what's in my head. So my imagination of a chair is realer than an actual chair. My understanding of the wall is better than the actual wall. And he goes, but that's not the real real either. Reality exists in a plane of existence that he calls the forms, or the idios. And so what happens is, if I'm going to make a chair, my mind reaches up into the idios, grabs the true chair, brings it into my head, but it's a copy. Copy is never as good as the original. And then my hands take the copy in my head and make a physical copy. So the chair, that chair, is a copy of the real thing. Aristotle reads this and goes, oh my God, what a bunch of nonsense. What even is that? It's nonsensical. Aristotle says, no, the chair is a collection of essences. This chair is black, so it has black essence. It's plastic, so it has plastic essence. It's shaped in a specific way. It has chair essence. That a thing is a series of essences. Ibn Sina goes, those essences are actually information. For example, there might be a scratch on that chair. And then the shape of the chair itself is information. And the molecular construction, he didn't have the concept of molecules, but they did have the concept of atoms. The construction, the material in there, that's also information. But he takes it one step further. He goes, so when that chair was originally made, it was not perfect, but it was close to perfect because it probably didn't have any scratches on it. It didn't have any damage. It didn't have any wear and tear on it. But then, as time goes by, more information is added to the chair because it gets bumped and it gets scratched. In other words, there's a relationship between information and time. Take me, for example. When I was born, I was a lot easier to describe, in part because I was a lot smaller. But also I had fewer scars, and there was a lot less information in my head. So the description of me was really easy. But as time goes forward, the description of me becomes more and more complicated, until finally I die, and my cells break apart and decay back into the earth. The description of me becomes extraordinarily complicated at that point. In other words, as time goes by, the universe increases the amount of information. And then he goes, oh, wow. What if we ran the clock backwards? So instead of us thinking about the future where there's more information, if we go back, there's less and less information. And he goes, okay, so at some point, we reach a moment where there's the minimum amount of information necessary for the universe itself to unravel from that moment. He calls that point in time and that information packet necessary being. In other words, 1,000 years ago, Ibn Sina described Big Bang and singularities and entropy. Also, that was not a major achievement for him. His real achievement was he's the guy who invented modern medicine. So if you look him up, it'll say the father of modern medicine. Some of you will get confused and go, I thought Hippocrates was the father of medicine. Yeah, because you're forgetting, I said modern, I didn't say medicine. I said modern medicine. Until Ibn Sina, medicine looked like this. There was disease, and the way disease affected you, but was based on, did you eat fish and drink milk? And did a black cat walk in front of you? Was Jupiter in alignment with Saturn? If so, when disease hits you, you're going to bleed from the eyes and have uncontrollable bowel movements. Ibn Sina walks up and goes, this is nonsense. What are you talking about? There isn't disease, there's diseases. They're all different, and they have different transmission vectors. So one disease, you sneeze on it, you get it. Another disease, you touch fecal matter and you get it. Another disease is bloodborne. Another disease comes by insects. Another disease comes from rats. In other words, what we need to do is we need to think about the transmission vectors. In his book, here you go, Qanun al-Tib. Qanun means law. Q-A-N-U-N. So if you're in physics and they say you need to read the canon, C-A-N-O-N, not C-A-N-N-O-N, means law because it's an Arabic word. You're using an Arabic word. Qanun is Q-A-N-U-N. It doesn't have to be, but that's how I'm spelling it. It could be with two O's or... So, The Canon of Medicine is the book he writes. In it, he includes hundreds of cures. We still use a bunch of those cures today. In Europe and the Middle East, his book is still necessary reading in medical school. But that's not what's interesting about him. Here's what he says. He says, you know what's better than all these cures I stuck in here? Prevention. Your goal is not to get the disease to begin with. If you cannot get the disease, that's way better than getting the disease, risking dying and getting cured, and then dealing with the side effects of the disease later. That's why he's the father of modern medicine. He's that guy who said, interrupt the transmission vectors. So when I was taught this in school, I was taught that Semmelweis, the Hungarian, figured this out. Yes, Semmelweis, the Hungarian, figured it out again 800 years after Ibn Sina figured it out first. Ibn Sina had a contemporary. His name was Ibn al-Haytham. Actually, for the record, neither guy was actually called Ibn Sina or Ibn al-Haytham. Their names were shockingly similar, and so it's hard to keep them apart. Abu Ali al-Hassan, Ibn Abdullah, Ibn al-Haytham, I think is Ibn al-Haytham, and then Abu Ali al-Hussein, Ibn Abdullah, Ibn Sina. So we just went, screw it, we're just gonna use the last parts of their names, which is like their grandfather's name, and we're just gonna reject the rest of it so that I don't have to remember which Abu Ali I'm talking about, and we can move on. So, Ibn al-Haytham was from Iraq, he was from Basra. He ended up, by the way, Al-Farabi actually was a student of Ishaq after Baghdad was created. that became the repository of knowledge. Baghdad was the center of it all. And Ishaq was a Christian Arab. And I just thought I'd throw that in there because I want to make sure that I didn't ignore the fact that this isn't just a Muslim project. This was also a Christian, and for that matter, there were Jews involved in this as well, because this was a tolerant society that embraced the differences and allowed them to thrive. And so Ibn al-Haytham goes to Cairo, and he starts working at Al-Azhar as a professor. Al-Azhar was a brand new school and mosque in a brand new city. Cairo is like the baby of the Middle East. It's only